All right, well, thank you everyone. This is Tech Talk on best practices for working remotely. And I'm Joanna Pineda. I'm CEO and Chief Troublemaker here at Matrix Group. And I'm joined by Maki. You want to say hello?
Let me unmute first and then say hello. Maki Kato, I'm VP of Engineering and not in charge of lunch anymore.
Yeah, no, you're not? Oh, well, anyway, but Maki is still in charge of IT at Matrix Group and in charge of all the technology that makes everything work. Leah.
Yes, I'm Leah Monica, Director of Marketing here at Matrix Group, and I am full-time remote, actually one of our 10 staff that works remotely out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and have been for about 4 years now.
Awesome. And Maria.
Hi there. I'm Manager of Special Projects, and I have been working remotely now for 5 years. So it's been kind of fun.
Awesome. So Maki is actually in the office. I am actually at home. So most of the people on this webinar are actually remote. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this. We got a request to please send out the recording. We'll make sure we do that. And we'll also send out a copy of the slides. We are muting everybody. Our wonderful Brian Clark, who's my director of partnerships, is actually staffing this webinar today. Thank you, Brian. He's muting everyone, but if you're experiencing problems, you can't get in, problems, with the audio, whatever, call the office. Renee's standing by. She's remote, and she'll help you out. We are absolutely taking questions, via the chat in Zoom. So let us know. And Brian, so go ahead and type your questions. Brian will let us know if there's a question. And then certainly we'd love to have conversations about this. If you've got questions after the webinar, we'll send you information on how to get in touch with us, but also you can post it on social. And here's the hashtag. I'm also at JM Pineda on Twitter. So, let us know how we're doing. So many of you on the webinar already know Matrix Group, but for those of you who don't, we are a digital agency based here in Crystal City. A quarter of my staff is remote, full-time, all employees. And basically what we do is we help associations create amazing member journeys so that they can increase membership and generate revenue. And associations hire us to solve these problems for them. They often want to increase membership or stem some kind of decline. They want to, improve their membership retention through compelling web and mobile offerings. They want to reach audiences with a clear brand. We have many clients these days that are reaching out to additional audiences or really wanting to kind of improve communications with a different audience, whether it's the media or it's Capitol Hill or a specific demographic within their membership. And then finally, we have clients that look to us to help them increase their staff productivity through integrations and custom development. So we're working with a number of clients right now that are looking to really tie together their different systems. We're working with some clients on some custom workflow applications. Here are our services. It all starts with creating a strategy for everything, and then whether it's redesigning a website, creating a mobile app, implementing a new membership database, or maybe creating a strategy where your data management is much better and it's a much better user experience for your members. We hope you'll give us a call if you need help with any of those things, or even if you don't and you just want to chat. So, Leah, we got a lot of clients that are really very highly affected by COVID-19. What can we do for them?
Yeah, there are a lot of things we could do. This is kind of uncharted territory for, I think, all of us. Nothing like this has really happened, and the social distancing and everything causing mass closures in lots of different arenas. So we're here for you to help in absolutely any way we can. We're your team, we're your partner. So whether you're looking to move your conference instead of just canceling it, to move it to online, to a virtual conference, if you want to explore that, you want ideas, you want us to help you, we are here. If you need help updating your website or creating what's called a dark page, that's normally in a time of crisis, people put up what's called a dark page, so almost like a microsite or a separate section of your website that either maybe has resources for your members, depending on what industry you're in, or just keeping them abreast of the changes that you all are making, whether that's for meetings or in any other realm. We can help you do that. And if you need help drafting an email communications, putting up blog posts, anything, in that realm, we are more than happy to help. I know everyone's strained, resources are thin, everyone's kind of scrambling. So please lean on us. We're here for you.
Yeah, and I thought people might be interested to hear that kind of in the midst of all of these cancellations, we have one client that has a conference in February, and it's essentially a speed dating conference. They're using software that we developed to coordinate the scheduling, and they made the decision to cancel the in-person conference, but they have decided to keep the scheduling. So they're encouraging the exhibitors and the attendees to continue to use the software to schedule meetings, and then to use their own forms of communications to actually hold the meetings. So if I'm an exhibitor and I've got 3 days lined up with meetings, they're encouraging them to continue to have those meetings. Some of those meetings might get canceled, but they're really hoping that those connections that they were creating between the attendees and the exhibitors will continue. They refunded the attendee registrations, and they have refunded most of the exhibitor registrations, but not all. So they'll have a tiny percentage of the revenue, but they're hoping that again that the conference still goes on. We also have a number of clients that are kind of looking at rescheduling. We've got some clients that are looking to maybe put some of the conferences online, and then finally we've got clients that are providing guidance to their company members about how to provide guidance to their members. So those are just some of the things that we're seeing out there. All right, so we're not specifically talking about COVID-19 today. We're really talking about working from home and working remote, and how do you make it much more, productive. I'm in a CEO group, and there's about half the group that says, we allow people to work from home. We've got a mature work from home policy. And we've got the other half that say, gosh, I still don't have a telework policy. I don't believe that people can do their jobs as effectively. I don't believe that they'll be as productive. How do I know that they're not slacking off? And how can my managers know that their staff is being as productive as they can be? So, kind of here's what we say about that. We say that working from home, I'm like remote from home, working from home can absolutely be as productive as it can be, but it's really important to have really good tools. It's important to have good governance and security, and those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. We've had like I said, we've had a really successful work from home policy, and it's working out for us. But I'll tell you, I, as a CEO, didn't always feel this way. Maybe about 5-6 years ago, we would allow people to work from home kind of on a case-by-case basis, and we did not have as many people working remote. I think maybe we had a couple people working remote full-time. And 2 things happened. I had a director who I trust very much say to me, Joanna, you're really pissing off the millennials by talking about working remote as a privilege, because they think that it is a right. And so you got to cut out that language. You're just going to piss them off. And of course, I was a little bit annoyed, but then I thought about it and I said, if there is a kind of a sector of my workforce that really views this as a privilege, what do I have to do to change my thinking on it? Because obviously I want to make sure that everyone in my organization really feels welcome. The other thing that happened was I was having lunch with Reggie Henry over at ASAE, and he said, Joanna, I've got a 1 day a week focus day policy. And he said, even for the folks who work full-time in the office, he says he sends them home 1 day a week to focus on the things that they say they can't normally focus on because they get interrupted. And he said it's been amazingly successful. So when I came back from that lunch, I went and talked to my managers and I said, hey, what do you think about a 1 day a week focus day, even for the folks who normally come into the office? And they said, let's try it. So we did a 2-week trial. Afterwards, we came back in, talked about it with the entire staff and said, take a day, work it out with your manager, focus on the thing that needs to be focused on deeply. The specs that you're writing, the deep testing that you need to do, the coding that you just kind of want to get out, whatever it is. And after a couple of weeks, the feedback from the managers and the staff was, I've got air quotes here, insane productivity. So I said, wow, okay, insane productivity. I also asked, what was the kind of, what's the feeling among the staff? And they said, this is a morale boost, Joanna, because For the folks who really do have some constraints, it gives them some breathing room. Maybe they've got a commute that one day a week they don't have to mess with. But for the folks who just want to get a lot of stuff done, feeling insanely productive and getting stuff done was just wonderful for both the managers and the staff. So I said, I can't believe it took me this long. You know, this is, you know, I'm blessing this, go for it. And now we've got all manner of, on any given day, I have no idea who's even working remotely. So how do we make this all possible? Because today, whether you're doing it because you must, or because in the future you just want more flexibility for your staff. So Maki, why don't you talk about some of the tools that make this possible? So the number one is connectivity, right?
Yeah, of course. Connectivity varies. We actually did a little experiment this morning, had all the people on the online report back to us their connectivity stats, and it does vary widely, and there are some you know, setups, I guess, that basically aren't performing up to what I would consider good. But you know, you need good internet access, and most of the providers, especially in the Metro DC area, have been very good. The only one that I saw falling quite short was RCN, but I don't know if that was a specific case or not. But Verizon has been very good. Comcast Xfinity has been very good as well. So, and even at the lowest tier, which is like 50/50 or whatever it might be, I think that's plenty good for work. And then, you know, if you have VPNs, that's a little more extra configuration. Probably it's done by your IT or your support vendor on a per laptop basis. And we've switched to almost 100% laptops in the office. That helped the flexible working one way or the other.
And Maki, you know, for a long time, I think, until about maybe 5-6 years ago, we felt like maybe the developers couldn't work on a laptop, that the laptops weren't as powerful. We don't have those concerns anymore, I believe.
That's correct. Many of the development that we're doing, much of the development that we're doing, I guess, can be done on a fairly average laptop. There are still some cases where some, you know, more processing is better, or the, you know, higher spec laptop would be helpful. And, you know, we've provided those in the cases where we need it, but it's becoming less and less.
So, and just one thing, there might be some folks who say, you know, why do I need a VPN? And we often have clients, we certainly were this case, where you require a VPN in order to access internal resources.
Yeah.
And that means you need a fat pipe into your office if a lot of people are going to be dialing, you know, not dialing in, if they're going to be accessing internal resources via the VPN, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about communications, because obviously that's a big deal too, and that's pretty integral to, you know, making sure that everything works. So, you know, here are the communications tools that you know that we use, that most of our clients are using. So some type of a communications device, a phone, you know, a desktop phone, a cell phone, or a soft phone. We'll talk about that in a second. Certainly email, certainly kind of instant messaging type services like a Slack, or if you've got Office 365, Microsoft Teams. So a couple of things about phones. Maki, do you want to talk a little bit about our journey with the phones?
Briefly, I guess I'll just sum it up to, we used to have an on-prem phone system that was okay. We used to have phones on the desktop for everybody. And then last year we decided, well, I guess that we went into the hosted VoIP solution several years back. But kept the handsets. And then last year when we moved, we actually got rid of most of the handsets, and only people that really need the handsets have it. We've switched to using soft phone over Wi-Fi for everybody. And most everybody has been okay with that. And we've occasionally deployed these Jabra conference speakerphones, which are like about $100, and they're fantastic in terms of the audio quality. And they have really good pickup in a small to medium room. And those have been very good. We have one of these in almost every conference room, and some special people like Joanna have their own.
Right. So this picture is actually my dining room table this morning. That's my mug. It now has lipstick marks all over it. But you know, what's interesting about it is, and just to make sure that people really kind of get this, we got rid of desktop phones. We moved to what's called a soft phone, where people are taking calls through their computer. And we're using a program called Zoiper. So if I call Brian on his extension, if I call 703-838-9777, extension 3016, it's actually going to ring on his computer. But we knew that the audio on the computer wasn't necessarily terrific, and it's uncomfortable, and it's potentially loud in an open area. So what we did was we gave people headsets. So instead of paying whatever $150 for a desktop phone, we spent about $120, I guess, $150 for a really nice set of headphones. And Maria, you use yours. I mean, that's you from this morning, right?
That is correct. I love it. This headphone is wonderful because it's fairly noise canceling. And since I have other people in the house, in another part of the house, I don't hear them. Or if the cat comes to the door and says, please let me in, I don't hear it. And it's very focused. And I find that the audio is really, really good on the headphones.
And Maria, you sound terrific. I'm on a Jabra and you're on the headphones. And Brian, I mean, you're on the phone, you know, all day long on these headphones. He might go into a conference room or he might do it from his desk. So I think for some folks who are saying, wow, here's something pretty radical. If I have to pay for a desktop phone and then pay for headphones, the costs start to mount. But what we did is we actually asked people, do you need a desktop phone? And to our surprise, most people actually said, I don't even need a phone. That's pretty crazy, right? So a lot of people at Matrix don't even have a phone. So how do we call them? Well, we Slack them. We call them on their cell phone. And then if we need to transfer a call to them, we might transfer a call to their cell phone. Or if they need to be on a conference call, they actually will go into a conference room and then use one of the Jabras. So we really kind of, I guess, turned upside down our thinking about phones by just asking the simple question, who needs a phone? And I will tell you guys a really funny story about the reason we even asked that question. We were talking about who needs a phone, and I can't remember, I was in a meeting for something else, and I said, well, let's call X. I'm not gonna out that person. And I said, so, you know, called his extension, called him, didn't answer. And I said, well, he's not at his desk. And Dave, one of my directors, said, no, he's at his desk, I just saw him. So I Slacked him and I said, hey, I just called you, why didn't you answer the phone? And he said, I don't know, I don't never answer the phone. But he responded to the Slack. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm not getting people phones. This is crazy. So, and you know, we need to tell you about Slack, whether it's Teams or Slack or something else. Leah and Maria, I think you all were going to talk about Slack.
Mm-hmm. And I'll get started. Because like Leah and I have both been remote for such a long time, for us, Slack is our big water cooler connectivity to the office. We have different channels. We have specific ones for clients. We have specific ones for teams. And we keep in touch all day long via Slack. Like, you know, very thing this morning, when I was looking at the slides for the presentation, I asked Leah a question and she's like, yep, answered it right away. I didn't have to try and call her. I didn't have to worry about it. And it's kind of the way we keep track of day-to-day things, instant things.
It's the way we communicate with each other on a regular basis, right? So it's the equivalent of sending someone an email, but it's a little quicker, but it's also the equivalent of a walk up, right? Hey, I have a quick question. And it is basically instant messaging, but so much more than instant messaging. And like Maria said, in our case, what we do is we can obviously send messages to each other individually, but we can also pick 3 people or however many people and start a group chat. But we also have a channel, is what they're called, for each functional group. So the new biz team has a channel. Actually, let me show you that. This is, you see here are some of our channels. New biz, matrix marketing, matrix refresh, et cetera. These are some, but we've got a channel for each of our clients as well that allows people to, who are collaborating on whatever. Like this morning, we're launching a website for the Solid Waste Association of North America. So the folks who are working on that project are in the Swana channel, and someone like me who's not normally in the channel is actually going to be lurking in that channel so that I can just make sure that it's going well. So those are some of the things that we do, on Slack. And we basically use it, Leah, we use it for all this stuff. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of to echo what Maria was saying as well, being remote, this is 100% the lifeline to the office. And I love Slack. And I guess one thing, we will get into kind of our policies going forward, but one thing I just want to mention is we've kind of established with remote staff when they go remote that we are almost expected to be more active on Slack maybe than most people, but I feel like that's filtered to the entire company. And the people I've heard, at least, that are in office are even slacking each other more than sometimes walking up to each other. So sometimes it is even the easiest person to get, or the easiest way to get in touch with somebody, within our company, even if, they were in person. So yeah, we use it for notifications. Like we were talking about, group chat is really huge. Our new biz team is actually a majority remote. So our new biz channel is,
Chatty.
like, yeah, it's chatty. Yeah, it's where all the magic happens. So that's a really, really important channel. And for all of us to kind of work as a team, and it works really well being remote. I feel like our new biz channel is just kind of like having a constant conversation like we were in the office, walking in, poking your head in, saying like, hey, need a quick answer on this thing. We're all super responsive. And probably because a lot of us are remote, we're very active on Slack and making sure we're always checking in, and that's how we're communicating. So it's been very helpful. Some people, there's a function within Slack that you can use it for phone calls and screen sharing, which is helpful that way too. Sometimes, if you're having trouble getting in touch with somebody, even on their, soft phone, you can kind of poke them on Zoom, and sometimes they'll respond that way quicker via, phone call. So it's really cool. And another thing that I think we've implemented in Slack recently that's been very helpful is we use the Google Suite. So there's an integration you can use that automatically syncs your Slack status with your Google Calendar. So if somebody's in a meeting, it automatically pops up on their status. So that's been really nice being remote too. I don't have to go and check the company calendar to say like, oh, am I interrupting a client meeting right now? When I'm asking this question, I can see, oh, they're in a meeting. Okay, I'll like poke them in 30 minutes or not expect a response right away. So.
I'll tell you, we actually did a whole webinar on Slack, I think last year. Some of you might be saying, oh God, Slack, just another way to waste time. We actually have a whole set of policies about Slack, and we do have a water cooler chat, but it's not as chatty as you might think. It's actually, maybe there's a half dozen messages that get posted, and then when we're all remote, maybe it's just a little bit more chatty just because we're all kind of craving some interactions. So as the CEO and the owner, I have not felt like people kind of abuse Slack, and that's because we have good governance and we have good policies, and we train people on Slack, and we kind of tell them, kind of what's appropriate. So, all right, I think we talked about this. All right, so, and then there's video conferencing and screen sharing tools, which are pretty important these days. So Leah?
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of great options out there. There's the traditional ones you normally hear of. The big ones are Zoom, which we're using now, GoToMeeting, and WebEx. We did use WebEx for a long time, and we've moved to Zoom. We didn't have a horrible experience with WebEx, but we absolutely love Zoom, super easy to use. So those are kind of the big ones. They're normally more paid programs. They're better for things like this, like webinars. They're also good for quick, small group calls as well. But there are lots of other options. I guess Skype for Business can be paid as well, but there are some free options there. Google Hangouts is something we use a lot internally though for quick meetings because you do have video capability, but you also have screen sharing there as well, but it's a little less cumbersome than setting up a Zoom meeting. You can do it on the fly in 2 seconds. We do use it with some of our clients too that we know have, they use Google if we want to do something on the fly. But there are a lot of really, really great and powerful and pretty inexpensive options these days. And video conferencing and screen sharing, especially from a remote perspective is so helpful in feeling connected. You know, when I was working in the office, we would often what we called war rooms. So we'd huddle together to, you know, work on some kind of a deadline or just kind of collaborate, brainstorm. And, you know, we'd have everything thrown up on the screen in the office. And I remember when I switched to remote work, I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm going to lose, I don't know, like being part of the team, seeing things in real time. I was very nervous about that. But a lot of these platforms have really helped. We jump on a Hangout in 5 seconds, we're sharing our screen, and I feel like I'm sitting in a physical conference room, you know, brainstorming and you know, coming up with solutions, seeing everyone work in real time. It's super, super helpful for being remote. So, yeah.
Yeah, here's a screenshot from last week's project managers meeting. So we have project managers meeting on Friday, and you can see in the bottom right, there were 3 of us. I hope we were practicing enough social distancing. That was me on the left, Maki on the right. I'm sorry, that was Brian on the right, and then Dave, you know, in the far corner, at the far end of the table. And then, you know, everybody's on the phone, and, you know, we've got this conference room with a big TV. You know, we call it the Brady Bunch effect, but what's nice about this is at the same time that for those of us in the office, we can see everybody, those remote can actually see everybody as well. And that's really made a huge difference to the remote folks. We've got a developer in California who said that's made all the difference in the world, that we turn on video all the time so that she doesn't feel like just a disembodied voice. And to us, she's not a disembodied voice. It's been really great. You can see Ray's got his headphones, Kevin's got his headphones, Jess got her headphones. So, all right. So then, you know, another pretty important part of, you know, managing our remote workforce is managing documents in the cloud. Because if you have to, I think before, Maki, we used to have a file server and you had to VPN in to access the documents. And Maria, you struggled with that, you said. It was like, there was a lot of latency.
It was so slow and molasses. Like, it was not feasible for me to work on documents there very often. I would often have to have people email them to me, which kind of defeats the purpose.
So then, Maki, we made a big change.
Yes, we did. We basically signed up for the Google G Suite, which we mostly made that transition because of email. And then we started using Google Docs as a company, and that was
going. We still had a file server, and then eventually we moved.
And then eventually we got to the point where we could, you know, jettison the file server, move everything to Google Docs, and that's what we did. And that, I think, helps everybody get access to everything without the VPN, and I think it helps. You know, productivity for everyone being remote as well. What else do we do? It was helpful from the IT perspective because now we don't have to provision capacity and, you know, upgrade the hardware every couple of years. That's always a drag. And owning hardware is always, you know, difficult. There's always potential outages, etc. We also, you know, weren't on the hook for the VPN to the office, which, you know, we were dependent on factors like the connectivity, etc. We feel like there's better security. I mean, without any doubt, I can say there's better security, and I think we have better search through all the documents.
Oh, I'll tell you, on the better indexing, it's nuts. I mean, before with the old file, you know, server, you could do a search, but really what you were doing was kind of navigating through your documents the old-fashioned way using the directories, right? So if you can imagine how deep our directories are, we've got a folder called clients, and then we've got, you know, if you go into it, it's got all the clients, and then so like if you're looking for SWANA, the Solid Waste Association, now you're going all the way down to the S. And then within SWANA, we've got a contracts directory, and we've got a proposals directory, and we've got a 2020 redesign. But with Drive, I mean, I can just do a quick search and poof, I'm there. So the indexing and the search are just great. And I know for us, you know, we're essentially using the power of the Google search to be able to find the documents, which I think has been pretty life-changing. And Leah and Maria, you have exactly the same access to the docs that I do from the office, that I do from home, which I think is life-changing, right?
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah. Hmm.
So, all right. So how do we make this all work? It's one thing to have really good technology, but you know, we always say this in our webinars. It's not just about the technology, it's about the governance and the policies that really make this work. So we thought we would share with you what we've done. And again, remember, we're not actually trying to sell you anything here. We're just sharing with you kind of what our governance policies are. So I took a look at our policy, which, by the way, if you'd like a copy, I'm happy to email it to you. Send me an email. You know, and these are the sections of our remote policy: who can work remote, staff expectations, manager expectations, what technology do you need, and what kind of security. So let's take them one at a time. The really amazing thing about working remote is that today everyone at Matrix Group can work remotely. I had lunch with a CEO client, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about remote, and he said, gosh, you know, my problem is I have some folks who cannot work remotely. And I think two things have made remote work possible for even the admins. They can even answer the phones from home and transfer, because it's, again, a VoIP system in the cloud. And because all the documents are remote, because our accounting system is remote, they can really do all their stuff from the laptops that they get to bring home every day. The developers work locally. And you know, if you're a project manager working on SpecDoc, you're in Drive. You get to work with everybody else. And new biz, last week, for example, we were working on a proposal, and there were 5 of us working on this proposal simultaneously in the same document. Because it was in the cloud, you know, we were able to do that. So anybody can work remotely, you know, here at Matrix Group, which we have worked really hard to be able to do. And there are certain things that we had to do technology-wise to make it happen. And then we had to change our policies. And in a certain sense too, like, I know us in leadership, we had to change our mindset too about, you know, really having expectations about what it means to work. So Renee, for example, who maybe she's you know, our kind of our main admin, our office manager. She's acts as my assistant. You know, she answers the front door, she answers the phone, she opens the mail. But there's obviously she can't open the mail from home, but everything else she can really do, you know, from her, you know, from our house. She can't obviously open the door for the Amazon guy, but you know, we've got other people who can do that. It only happens once a day. We do have a lot of staff, actually not a lot. We have staff expectations, and these are it, right? We say, look, if you're going to be working from home, you're going to be working from a co-office space, you're going to be working from a hotel room, here's what you got to do. You got to stay on Slack, and you got to keep your status updated. That means that if you're on a call, if you're in a meeting, you're at lunch, you got to keep your status updated so that people know that, you know, you're in a meeting, and that's why you're not responding to Slacks. You're expected to attend all the stand-ups. We have them twice a week, and all of the meetings. So, you know, there's no reason not to be participating in calls. You know, we tell people, check your email once an hour. You don't need to be a slave to your email. In fact, we think it's a mistake to be a slave to your email and to your Slack, because that's just going to interrupt your work and interrupt your train of thought. We also say, look, when you do get an email or you get a Slack, you please acknowledge it. You don't have to acknowledge it right away unless it's urgent, but acknowledge it so that people know you've seen it. We also say, please check in with your team members and manager at the start and the end of the day. And this is actually pretty important, because what it does is it eliminates the, oh, you know, John is no longer online and I don't know what he did today. And actually, this is kind of a good practice in general, even for people who are working in the office. But what we found is by being explicit about this, people just know what's going on. And I think it adds to the sense of community too, because what happens is, you know, John, I'm picking on John, will say, hey, I'm done with all this stuff and I'm getting ready to sign off for the day. Does anyone else need anything from me? So we say your responsibility as the staff person is to check in with other people on your team and to check in with your manager at the start and end of the day. And then again, obviously during, you know, this particular COVID-19 crisis, I am not asking people to come in, but what we do say is that as needed, you're going to come into the office, you know, when requested, that there's not going to be a lot of drama about, you know, I can't come to the meeting. I usually work remote. So if Kevin, for example, he's one of my associate directors, he works mostly remote, but if there's a client meeting, no matter what time, he basically says, look, you know, he's going to make it happen. For the folks who are full-time remote, if we need them in the office, then we fly them in, and that's just part of the deal. You know, that when we need you, that you're going to come. Maria and Leah, do you have any comments on this about how it's working?
I think it works fairly well. You know, as long as we keep to all of this and everybody remembers to acknowledge. I think that's the biggest thing for us who work full time, is that if we send out Slacks into the wild, we need to know that someone's seen it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
But I think everyone overall is pretty good, because I think more and more people are working remote, even if it is just for a focus day. I think that's actually, you know, brought to people's attention how important it is to acknowledge a Slack, because now everyone's kind of living that life, at least temporarily. So yeah, responsiveness is important, but I think we do a great job.
And you know, keeping your status updated is pretty important. You know, before COVID-19, you know, we have some people who are full-time remote, but for the folks who are kind of, you know, sometimes remote, in Slack, there's a little house icon that you can put on your Slack, and that tells people you're working from home. And I'll tell you one thing that I tell folks in order to make all of this work is I say, hey, do not wait to get in touch with someone until they're back in the office. When I hear that, I actually say, please don't do that. Like, they're working, they're at home. It's a disservice to yourself, to your client, and to your coworker to say, I'll wait until, you know, he or she is back in the office. Please make the remote stuff work by going ahead and calling that person, you know, doing a Slack, doing a video chat, etc.
I will say too, to that comment, Joanna, I give you credit. You're very good about when you do call me out of the blue, though, being a remote staff, the first thing you always say is, hey, do you have a minute? Are you in the middle of something? Because you can't just walk up to my face and see that I'm intently writing and that I'm in the middle of a thought and I can't stop. You're very good about saying, like, hey, do you have some time to talk right now? Do you want me to call back in 15? So that's maybe something else to keep in mind with all of this, is if you are just calling someone, you know, kind of give them the out to say, I'm in the middle of something, 30 minutes. So
yeah, absolutely. And people will do that, right? They'll say, hey, I'm right in the middle of something, but you know, what about 20 minutes? So I mean, let's go to the flip side, the manager expectations. So our expectations are that you're going to participate in calls and meetings as needed, that you'll come into the office as needed. That, you know, the third thing is that you're going to have one-to-one meetings with your team members regularly, that as a manager, you know, just because people are remote doesn't mean that you're not doing the important job of checking in individually with your team members. And I know it sounds so obvious, but it's easy to hide behind the technology and say, well, you know, yeah, I know he works for me, but I have no idea what he's doing. You know, it's still your job to manage. It's still your job to provide guidance. You know, the last piece of advice, and this goes to what Leah said, is, you know, part of our policy and my expectations of managers is that you will pick up the phone on a regular basis, that you do not have all of your interactions through Slack and through email. It's amazing how much connection you can have if you pick up the phone, and certainly in this case, phone and video. Leah, I will call you up sometimes when even a Slack will do, but I just think it's nice to hear your voice. Maria, you know, I do that as well. And I think it's part of
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, also being a full-time remote person, I think it's very easily, you can feel isolated very easily. So managers just taking the time to think about that and be proactive and say, I could Slack them, but I'm going to pick up the phone and it's going to take me 5 minutes either way. Sometimes picking up the phone is nice. You don't want to go the opposite direction and be interrupting someone constantly. But yeah, speaking is very nice from a remote perspective too, just being able to get on the phone with someone.
Yeah, I tell my managers, you know, we have a company fundamental, and that is do not deliver bad news via email or Slack. Well, I also say don't deliver good news via email or Slack. You know, like how awesome to actually have a face-to-face or a video or a phone conversation with a client or a team member saying, I have good news. The site launched. I have good news. We fixed the problem. I have good news. You know, our webinar just had 100 signups, whatever it is. So. All right, so Maki, we got a lot of technology that really makes this all happen.
Yes, we do. I think I covered some of this already.
Yes.
So G Suite or whatever it is that you know, you could use instead of that, but that's what we use. It works well for us, and it actually covers a lot of IT. What used to be the concerns of IT. We did Zoom for the video conferencing. That was also already mentioned. On the internal system side, we have our own intranet, but in addition to that, we have the Jira, GitLab, Wiki, Slack, Secret Server. Secret Server is this application that we use to share passwords. It's been a life-changing selection, I guess. And Joanna also mentioned our accounting systems and what is it? The phone system are in the cloud as well. When we picked up Gmail, it wasn't our intent, but we later learned that we could use the Google identity as basically the SSO to unlock systems. So we've actually later integrated almost everything with Google Auth for people to log into systems. The only exception still currently is the intranet, I think. I think otherwise Jira, GitLab, Wiki, Slack, they all use the Google identity to authenticate people.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't understand that, that's if I'm trying to get to our wiki, and that's basically our kind of our knowledge management system where we put in, hey, here's how these things work. So if you're a client, know that there's a whole bunch of wiki pages devoted to you. You know, how does this work? Who works on it? You know, what's the documentation for this thing? So if I go to, you know, our wiki page, and I haven't logged in, it'll ask me to log in using my Google credentials. So what's nice about it is, one, I don't have to manage a whole lot of passwords, and two, because it's Google authentication for all the IT types on the phone, it eliminated the need for a domain controller. So when we moved into our new office, not only were all of our documents in the cloud, which meant no file servers, we even eliminated the domain controller. So there's really nothing in the office outside of, gosh, I don't know, Maki, on the IT side, I guess it's firewall and router.
Yeah, so we have switches and a router, firewall, and we have one laptop that's converted to being our remote repository for backups from production.
Okay,
so it's
yeah.
the essential stuff. And that's about it.
Yeah, so all of this technology has made it, again, so that me being at home today, I have the exact same access that Leah and Maria have. Leah from Philadelphia and Maria from San Antonio. You know, whenever we could last year, we said, when we were moving to a new office, we said, hey, you know, what else can we put in the cloud? We already had a lot of stuff in the cloud, but some things were not. Like we had a self-hosted GitHub, but we said, let's put everything online. And what we actually found was when we did the kind of the cost benefit analysis, self-hosting with the server time and staff time needed to keep it, you know, managed and upgraded was the same or much less with a hosted solution. So that's just something to think about. And Maki, correct me if I'm wrong, this has drastically reduced the time needed by IT to just keep all of this stuff running. This is a lot of technology.
Yeah, it probably easily adds up to one full-time person that, you know, that all they did was keep things up to date and keep the domain controller and the office network and all the, you know, local servers managed like that. So we've been able to focus more effort.
Speaking of technology, there's a question or a little bit of conversation about like what is our redundancy policy? What is our backup? What do we do if there's an outage with one of our services? What's the plan for that? Mike, are you able to talk about any of that at all?
Yes. So for the for the very critical stuff, we have, and for the customer systems, which actually I guess are not part of this discussion. So for the very critical things that we've identified as very critical, we have a DR plan for all of those, like copies of it, printouts of it, and whatever else. And beyond that, we don't have a whole lot. So we don't, at this very moment, have a complete copy, a daily copy of everything that's in Google Docs. We are just, and the plan is, if Google Docs goes offline, we're going to have to, work without those docs, or, work in a somewhat different way. We'll have to figure that out when that happens. For all the systems that we host in Amazon, we have a DR plan for that. And what are the, for all the repositories, we have a plan for that. And for the Jira, we don't have a plan.
Right. Don't we have a plan for all the passwords?
Yes, the passwords is one of those things where we have a backup copy.
So for the things that are super critical, they are backed up. So, speaking of all that stuff, none of this would work without adequate security policies and the confidence really on my part and Maki's part that, with all this distributed work going on, that we're truly secure. So here are just some of the things that we're doing. But even on top of this, when you start at the company, we actually have a whole set of security policies that you have to read, discuss, understand, and sign that you understand. And then at every staff meeting, we actually have security training where we go over the security policies over and over and over again. So if you're working remote, or you're using your own device for something, or whatever it is, you can't be unclear about the security policies. But here are some of the things that we do. One is the multi-factor for all critical systems. So if you're authenticating via Google, we require the two-factor on Google, either through Duo or Google Authentication. So that means you've got the multi-factor on all of the systems protected by Google. We've also got strong password policies that we are enforcing through the different vendors. And Maki, I think, Maki tells me on a regular basis, we have got to tell more clients about Secret Server or having some kind of enterprise password management. Maki?
Yeah, these are basically web-based applications that allow you to, store a piece of secret and share it with the right people. And it also has the benefit of, we can actually audit who got to see what secrets. So at the time of determination, we can basically audit that and reset all the passwords that need to be reset based on what they've seen. That sort of stuff that, previously, even, with the best efforts, this was not possible. So it certainly improves the position in terms of managing passwords. And shared passwords are, just sometimes unavoidable. We certainly have passwords that are given from our customers, and that's basically shared passwords. The people that need to know get to use it, but we then, don't have any way to track that without this mechanism. So that's been great. What else has it done?
Well, let me just say this about Secret Server. So we used to have a self-hosted Secret Server, and then we moved to cloud-hosted Secret Server. So that was one of the things that absolutely critical to us. Was backed up regularly, still backed up regularly, but it's now hosted in the cloud. So again, we don't have to keep track of keeping it updated.
Yeah, and that one.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That one in particular, we we deliberated long and hard about whether. So initially when we started, we were concerned about the security of, just, putting all these passwords in the cloud. And that sounded kind of really
scary.
Yeah, kind of scary. I guess you could still argue that it's kind of scary, but, it's one of those things that we weighed the trade-off between, utility versus, risk. And, it just so tremendously helped us do our business that we couldn't see it not being available and in the cloud. The self-hosted version was great, but the time came to basically get rid of everything, our server room, all of our servers, and that's the point where we said, do we feel secure enough to move this to a vendor that's going to host it in the cloud? And we decided, they're going to host the same software effectively in their data center, which we thought was good enough for us.
Yeah, the other thing is, it's their job to keep our data more secure, and they think about it all day long, at least we hope they do, versus we can't think about it all day long because we're doing other things, right? So that's why ultimately, we made the decision. We obviously talked to the vendors, did our research. For those of you that don't have any type of enterprise password management, consider this. We have a client that, and this happens all the time, somebody leaves, somebody gets sick, somebody gets fired, and unless you've got a handle on all of those passwords, it could take weeks or months to recover those passwords. Like, you just might lose your Twitter account. So, just think about that.
And we're very diligent about asking people, did you put it in secret server? And we basically acknowledge a lot of things with just a link to the secret server. So
yeah, but it also means that, as we've got this distributed workforce, we're not constantly emailing or calling or slacking people. Hey, do you have a password for that? Yeah, sure, here are the credentials. Like, it's actually against our policy to send passwords over Slack and over email. You go to secret server and you access the password, which means all the passwords have to go in. So Leah, we've got some tips for thriving as a remote person, because you've been doing this now for 4 years, something.
Yeah, and I think this is very important on the kind of the other side from, management and how do we get this set up from that kind of structure. It's also really important for anyone who's working remotely to be set up for success. I actually just had a phone call with a friend the other weekend who he's moving, but keeping his job and transitioning to remote. And he had worked remotely 1 day a week, but he was like, man, it's a little bit different. Like, I need your tips for success. And this is something I feel very passionate about, that I found that has worked really well for me. I was very nervous about starting to work remotely, that my productivity would drop, all those things that, people claim are kind of the downfalls. But, I agree with Joanna. I'm actually much more productive at home if I follow these tips. So my number one tip is always get up and get ready for your day as if you were going into the office. So don't just, set your alarm, roll out of bed 5 minutes before you need to hop online. Get up, get ready for your day, clear your mind. So for me, that's, I wake up, I exercise, I take a shower, I blow dry my hair, I get ready, have my cup of coffee, make my breakfast, and then I settle in for work. I don't just kind of roll out of bed, look all disheveled. And I guess and to that point, I always recommend getting dressed and not sitting around in your pajamas, because you'd be surprised. Like, if you're comfortable, you're much more likely to kind of have a lazy mentality. How you're dressed really does impact your productivity, from what I found. Now, I'm not dressing in a suit every day. I'm not wearing exactly what I would to, like a client meeting or something of that nature. But my rule of thumb is I wear something that I would walk out of the house at any given moment in. So I normally have, like jeans and a, normal comfy top on, but I'm not sitting around in my pajamas. I think that's very important. The other thing is to have a dedicated workspace. I know kind of in this crisis, like if you're working full-time remotely, you're probably going to think a little bit more seriously about having a home office. In this kind of crisis situation, I'm sure a lot of people don't really have that flexibility, but if you do have a desk in your house, try to go sit at the desk and not just be working, from your couch, especially, or even sometimes from your kitchen table. That can be a little bit distracting, but definitely, try and sit at a dedicated space and not, in your lounge chair. I've had horror stories of friends falling asleep on the job because they've decided to settle into their lazy boy for the day. So that's a big one. I know right now, social distancing is a big thing, but something that's very helpful for me is getting out of the house to kind of break the day, to make that transition between kind of where you're living and where you're working. So So for me, if I can at the beginning of the day, take a quick, 2-block walk just to feel like I'm not like stuck in my house all day. And at the end of the day, I think it's very helpful to get out of the house. So to make that mental break, even if it's raining, I'll just try and literally walk 1 block to make the mental shift. So I kind of say, okay, I'm shutting down my computer, I'm taking a lap, and when I come back in, my home is my home. My home is no longer my office. Granted, emails pop up and all of that, but I think it's very important to make that mental separation. And that's tremendously helped me. At first, I didn't do that, and I had this really hard time with transitioning between, shifting my mental focus at the end of the day and not getting everything kind of muddled or feeling like you're constantly working or you're not all that productive because you're just hanging out at home. So that's a huge tip I have. And right now, like just be careful if you go outside, take your space from people, but I think, taking a lap around the block, as long as you're distancing yourself, should be okay. The other thing, especially in this situation too, is I know a lot of people are all of a sudden remote with their whole family and with their children. My big suggestion here is be clear about boundaries and communicate with your family. So say, this is my office, these are my working hours, do not interrupt unless someone's bleeding and dying, that kind of a thing. I had a full-time nanny out of our house for a while, and the rules I set with her was like, I have a home office, I'm up in my office. If you need me, text me. When I can respond, I will. I'm on calls, I'm in meetings, I have work to do. I didn't want the expectation of my child walking in, her walking in, and just having full access to me at any time. So I think those boundaries are very important to have in place as well. And respecting the boundaries of the other people in your house too, so they can get their work done while we're all kind of huddled inside together. Another thing, it's really tempting, but leave the chores for later. Try and focus. I think if you're trying to do things while you're working, you're not really, giving your full attention. So try to just knuckle down, and you're not commuting. So you have a little extra time to get those chores done. So leave those chores for another time. Focus on work. And the other thing is to stay connected and communicate. Definitely over communicate when you're working remotely. People can't see if you stand up to start your lunch break. So if you have Slack, set your Slack status, send a message to your team. Hey guys, got to run to the bank real quick. I'll be back in 15. Things where if you were walking out of the office, the receptionist sees you leave, she knows you're gone. That's not going to happen when you're at home and people can't see you. So just stay connected and communicate with your team in whatever means that works for you guys.
And I will tell you that Leah is an amazing remote worker, and so is Maria. So, one thing that I would say here, and I know we're running out of time, is be intentional with your work from home policy. And it sounds kind of silly, but having conversations with your staff to say, hey, here's some tips for working remotely. Here are my expectations of you. You're not leaving it up to chance, and you're not leaving it up to, is this working? Okay, so just really quickly, here's some strategies for managing your team. So, we've got all manner of systems. We've got Jira, we've got the internet, we got email, we got Slack, but how do you know what people are working on today? We actually have this, and, we blanked it out. But every day people just update this, and the idea behind this is what we're working on today. And this both lets people know what people are working on. It means that managers know exactly what is at the top of Jamie Q's priority list. And it eliminates a lot of the walk-ups and, lets people to do, kind of deep work. Just a couple of things. One is consider the emotional impact of remote work. Actually, last Friday during my manager's meeting, I asked a simple question, how is everyone doing? And then I shut up and let people kind of talk. And one person said, I'm worried about my mom. So, let's just be really compassionate with each other and kind of think beyond just you're working from home, is the work getting done? There might be other things that are distracting that person. And if we can just kind of get it out there, maybe figure out how we can get them help, then, we're all working better together. Use video whenever possible. And then I think it's just nice to check in with people throughout the day in the same way that you would check in with folks, if they were in the office. One thing that I will probably do today, since most people have been remote for about 3 days now, and I certainly do this during snowstorms, is in our general channel or our water cooler channel, I might say, hey, how's everyone doing? Give me a read on your mood. And then, people people will say, I'm good, I'm a little bit lonely, I'm a little bit antsy, whatever. Or if just for a little bit of fun, like we do this during snow weeks or snow days, I might just say, hey, it's the middle of the day, post a picture of your work from home, and they'll post a picture of their view, they'll post a picture of their cat, whatever, and it just kind of, adds some connection. So, I'll close with this. I think what's really obvious about this webinar is that cloud makes remote possible, because we still all rely on resources to do our job. The more resources you have in the cloud, the easier it is for Maria to clean up documents. The easier it is for Maria to look at the JIRA tasks and clean them up. The easier it is for Leah to find the proposal, et cetera. So, Brian, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I've got one more. Leah did such a great job talking about how she works from home, but there's a question about when she comes to the office here locally at our location. What do we need to provide? What do we need to give her? What's our space like?
Oh, I'll answer that, and then Leah, you can you can chime in. So when folks come into the office, we have kind of empty workstations that we make available for them. We do a couple things. We let people know, first of all, that Leah's coming into the office, just because I think it's nice for people to know, and then, if they've been wanting to see Leah, then they know she's coming in. We make available a space for her to work. She's got her laptop. And then we actually, in a sense, almost scheduled more meetings for her than she might normally have, because we want to take advantage of the face-to-face time. So if she's coming in on a Thursday, we might move a meeting that normally happens on a Friday. We also try and maximize some socializing, because I believe that socializing actually cements relationships. So I'll say maybe to a couple of the project managers, Leah's coming in, who's interested in going to lunch with her? Certainly, I'll make sure that I have time with her as her manager, or we might organize a new bids lunch. Leah, anything to add there?
No, I don't think that. I mean, I think you made a great point that especially someone that's remote and further away distance-wise. I'm not somebody that's working remote 3 or 4 days a week and in the office 1 or 2 days a week. Yeah, when I come in, it's normally, I just end up sitting in a conference room with the team anyways, because we're trying to all be together and get in that FaceTime and team building and just meetings that need to happen in person. So, yeah.
Hey, Joanna, there's another question that came in, and it's interesting because it's something that we've become used to, but organizations, companies, associations, et cetera, that are kind of getting new to this kind of work from home policy. It's like, what are the expectations of your availability, being available all day, all evening? What if you walk away from your desk? We covered this a little bit, but I suspect that can be a little hard to understand as you're kind of thrust in this position. We're used to it. What I think it goes back to some of the policies that you have in place and so forth. But I want to talk just a little bit more about expectations on availability and how we deal with that.
I think this is a really interesting question. And by the way, if anyone's interested, I hope I get picked. Maki and I are doing it, or we're submitting a session abstract for TAC. It's called Taking Back Your Inbox, Your Time, and Your Life. Because I think this always on stuff can be really dangerous. So I'll say that for the remote staff, we have the same expectations of the people who come into the office every day. That when you're in the office, you're available. But during non-business hours, we're all going to think twice about whether or not we're going to be in touch with you. I have told my team explicitly, if I send you an email at night, it doesn't mean I expect a response. It might just be when the thought hit. If I really need you, I'll text you or call you. And that's going to be a rare thing. And I think we have that expectation of almost everybody, right? Like when you're off, you're off. I don't have the expectation that people are checking their email, all day long and all night long, which is why we have protocols for who's going to be on call and who's going to respond to what. But we do also have the protocol that if something urgent does come up, we're going to text or we're going to call.
I would add too there that as we were saying earlier too, with you're signing off for the day, check in with your team, especially in this kind of, situation where everyone's kind of remote, saying like, okay, guys, I'm about to sign off for the day. That kind of signals end of day, for the manager. And then, the expectation is if there's something urgent, again, like you would to anyone that's normally in office. I feel like that's another great reason for remote staff to check in and say, signing off for the day. Does anybody need anything?
Absolutely. And to us, being remote does not mean 24/7 by any means. It's exactly the same as the people who work in the office. Maria, for example, does not work on Fridays. And it's got to be a really, really important and urgent thing for the staff to be in touch with Maria on Fridays. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in too, if you can at all help it, if you have a separate computer or whatever, use only your work computer for work and use your other stuff for personal stuff. So when you end at the day, you close your work computer and you don't come back to it. And that helps with that separation.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Hey, I know we're out of time, so let me just say this. If you would like to just chat, it's not a charge thing. It's really just a, hey, we're struggling with this, or we've got some thoughts, or I just need some follow-up advice. Send me an email and we'll do our very best to give you some guidance. We really have been very intentional about our work from home policy, and I hope that it really came through in this webinar. I hope that what's come through is it's not just about the technology, and it's not just about saying you can work from home. It's about all of the governance and the policies and the social aspect that make it an intentional journey for you and your staff. So, we wish everyone kind of a great day. Be safe, be productive, and thank you very much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.